their properties until the state made them come in and do it. And then they hire a firm. Then the township probably did the same thing. Chester Borough recently went through a yearly reevaluation, so they do it every year. For 4 or 5 years, that really seemed to help their tax rates, in my opinion. I read these at both Chesters, by the way. Washington Township recently underwent a reevaluation because the state threatened to take them to court and make them do it. What I think is that if there are 5 towns in a region, or 10, or 9, or whatever the number of towns are, I believe that there should be a law in Trenton, and this isn't a hard one to pass, that says that maybe it's countywide. One firm is hired to do the evaluations at the same time in every town, so that the shenanigans that go on in our political bodies, and I believe there are eliminated once and for all. So that a $500,000 house in Washington Township is taxed at the same rate as a $500,000 house in Mendon Township, Chester Borough, Chester Township, wherever.
Gets appraised at the same time.
Gets appraised at the same time by the same people, by the same company, by the same appraiser. So that takes out any supposed irregularity that could creep in.
Takes out market variables.
Yeah, this is more.
It's a formula that the county uses as well, because the county has to assess county taxes, and so they do that across all of their towns in their counties.
Okay, so the bottom line, no, it's not simple. It doesn't sound simple. And neither is per pupil, I would assume. I mean, per pupil formula is not as simple as here's the tax we have to pay, you divide it by the number of kids, spit out a number.
And that is a great question for Mike Calver.
Because it doesn't sound that simple, because otherwise everyone would be talking about the same numbers, and we're not. Okay. Yeah.
My name is Charlie Harrington, and I am the chair of CBS, and I am a Chester Township resident. And I've been sitting here listening, taking this all in, and I have a few things to say. First of all, to any of you in the audience who would like additional information about CBS, I understand, Kristen, thank you, who would like additional information about CBS, our group is extremely transparent. I am more than happy to take your email and give you any and all information that you would like. Second of all, I am happy to hear that you will send an advanced set of questions to Mike Calver. I've been in contact with him on this issue. He is extremely resourceful, and I'm sure that he will prepare any and all answers and be ready to go on, what is it now, March the 22nd?
22nd.
Right. Lastly, I just heard this gentleman over here refer to stirring up a hornet's nest. That is one thing that CBS has tried hard not to do. We have tried to base our actions, base our comments, base our public presentations on facts. The behavior demonstrated by some board members tonight is in laughing at the sincere efforts of Chester and Mendon taxpayers and voters is shameful. Not shocking, but shameful. And Mr. Johnson, I would seriously question your statement that you represent Chester Borough and Chester Township. I don't think that that is exactly the case, in particular with this issue. This is a serious effort by serious people. To sit here and laugh and say that the municipalities have absolutely no business bringing this and bringing their resolutions where they have listened to their constituents and their board and their voters who have come to them in a sincere concern on the disparity that Chester and Mendon pay in taxes versus Washington Township is, again, it's just shameful. And I'm sorry that I had to witness this. I certainly hope the newspaper article that's printed tomorrow or in the coming week reflects this board's behavior in laughing at Mr. Button and the other serious efforts that have gone on here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take that.
I'm just wondering if the people behind CBS recognize the fact that if you get your resolution passed, and suppose it becomes law, goes to Trenton and they say, fine, all regional districts will be based 100% by student population. The Chester Consolidated District, which is the only one of its type, is a mini regional district. It's governed by an interlocal agreement between the towns. if you move to 100% per pupil funding, it's interesting because the gains that Chester Borough gets from the high school will be offset by the loss, the additional amount that they'll have to pay the Chester K-8, that they'll have to pay the borough for, excuse me, I'm confusing myself. The gains that Chester Borough gets from the high school will be offset by the additional amount that they'll have to pay Chester Township if the Chester Township K-8 also moves over to per pupil. Right now, they basically have the same issue we do. The township subsidizes the borough educationally in the K-8. So the borough will be in a position where, yeah, it's going to definitely gain by changing the funding formula here, but it will lose. It's funded in the area of $400 a household on the K-8 level. So my point is, it's just one of those issues that I would think that, again, you want to examine very closely before you rush out to change things, because there's a lot of things that come up that may not have been taken into consideration. And as Chester representatives, or as the only one here, Mrs. Gilmet is not here, it seems it behooves you, Mr. Johnston, to find out exactly what the facts are. Since you represent both Chesters, you want to, you don't want to favor one over the other. But let's not jump to judgment here, because that's a huge mess. What's stranger is that the Chester Borough Council has voted for this. I'm not sure they're aware of the implications. I saw the Mendham Township resolution to Trenton, which stated unequivocally that it had to be based on 100% per pupil basis. I think you have a real problem here. And when Mr. Calver comes on the 21st or 22nd, I suggest you take it up with him and ask him to look at the numbers. And then the Chester Borough residents can decide, is this good for me or is it not? Another thing I just wanted to sort of pile on to what Mike said, when you're talking about fairness, with the Abbott districts and state funding, the Abbott districts send, I believe, 20% of the kids to schools in New Jersey, of all the kids. They get 60% of the state aid. So the remaining gets the balance. Another one of those things that's incredibly unfair. And if you want to change something, if you want to get some of the money you send to Trenton back, maybe you should look at that. Because there's far more money there in state aid that goes to Trenton that we pay and don't get back than there is on this issue.
Yep. Ann Clark from Chester Township again. So I took some time today to go look at assessed properties in all the different towns, because I think it's important to know who are the biggest winners and losers in the towns. And I just used Data Universe, so maybe something's arguable. But it'll be a big shift from residential taxpayers to businesses. And I think it's important that our business community know that, because if you look at the top assessed properties for Washington Township, I looked at all the towns, any assessed properties above $2.5 million. And for Washington Township, there are 17 of them assessed above that, and they're all commercial. There is not a single residence in Washington Township. So it's important for the Washington Township business community to be made aware of what's going on too, because it's an anti-business tax move. It could be characterized as that, because that's the reality of where the assessments are. If I look at, for instance, Mendham Borough, and I go above the $2.5 million assessed level of properties, I have 4 properties other than residential. Kings Plaza, Roxidicus Golf. They need the break. I think it's very important. Holly Manor and an auto dealership on Main Street. It's probably a Ford dealership. That's it for businesses affected in Mendham Borough. But there are 27 properties assessed above $2.5 million, and I think they'd appreciate that. So that's important. Chester Borough, no residential properties above $2.5 million, but there are 8 commercial properties, so they'll gain. So there's a positive for those commercial people. Mendham Township, only 2 commercial gainers. Woodland Lake, some large property owner, and Mendham Golf and Tennis. And then the rest are residential, 38 properties assessed more than $2.5 million. For Chester Township, the only commercial ones, there were only 2, Kessler and 1 other commercial. And then you'll have 12 residents whose properties are assessed above $2.5 million, who will gain the most from this. So I just wanted to put it in perspective about who the biggest winners and biggest losers are. So Washington Township is all commercial people who are going to be impacted.
And it's going to be predominantly residential for the other towns. So it's really an anti-business shift in the property tax burden. It's the, I didn't go, I just went and looked. All properties above $2.5 million. Anybody can do that.
Thank you very much. Interesting data point. Yes.
Marcia Astor, Chester Township. Do you think it would be possible to send out a notice through the Honeywell system or whatever we use? Occasionally I'll get messages from Dr. Carpluck, Tricky Tray or something. I mean, it's not necessarily all, schools closing an emergency about this upcoming meeting, especially when the date has been changed. I think there's a lot of good information there. It could behoove the school to just put that out and encourage people that we will have the state expert coming. Here's what he's going to discuss, questions that we want him to answer. So
I think we can do an email blast. I don't think we use
We
Honeywell.
could do it as an email, not as an
okay,
email.
is that what I get from?
Yes,
Okay,
that's what you get from Dr. Corporal.
Okay, so that's my first little communication point. And then my second one has nothing to do with the valuation, but Jackie, can you tell me in the current budget, is the librarian being shared again this year between Mendon and Central?
Yes.
It is. Okay, because I know I stood up before, I love the library, I'm a real library nerd. Is there any method of assessing whether the teachers and the staff and the students have been negatively affected by sharing that service? I know it had to be done as a budgetary reason. I would hate to see it just become the norm. And is there any mechanism to judge whether the quality, the teachers, are they receiving the same sort of service from the library when they have to share the librarian? So I don't know if there's anything in place to do that. And I just say that because I do work up here often. And the librarians through this current one also Jane Brooks before her mentioned that kids are coming through the school system with terrible library skills. And it's getting